The children were never orphans. Thomas Rigby didn't adopt them from foster homes or agencies. He found them in places no child should ever be. Abandoned subway tunnels, the hollows of lightning-struck trees, the silent corners of condemned hospitals. Each child arrived with no memory, no past, and an unnatural stillness that made the air in the house grow thick and stale. They never spoke, but the house was never quiet. At night, a low, wet scratching echoed from inside the walls, like something was trying to dig its way out. And they all shared one terrifying trait. Their eyes held the same ancient, knowing void. A gaze that seemed to peel back the layers of reality itself. Rigby's journals, discovered later, contained a single, repeated phrase scrawled in a frantic hand. They are not children, they are keys. The final entry was just a date, the day all 12 vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the smell of ozone and cold earth, and the faint, collective sound of a lock turning. The police found 11 bodies, but the 12th child, the one who slipped away, was my father. The air in that old house still carries the faint, metallic scent of what happened there. And sometimes, in the quiet, you can almost hear the whispers that weren't meant for you. The photograph trembles in his grasp before slipping to the floor. A stained, folded document lands beside it on the kitchen table. The bold title reads, "Final Adoption Decree." And tonight, I found the adoption papers. Every signature, every seal, they're all forgeries. A flawless, chilling counterfeit. My entire existence is a lie meticulously constructed by a monster. The air grew thick with the scent of aged paper and something metallic. A primal dread took hold, freezing the breath in my lungs. The title appears, The Bloodline. My name is Sarah Miller. This is my kitchen, in Austin, Texas.
The man at the barbecue is my dad, David.
The scent of charcoal and seared meat hangs in the air, familiar and comforting. Yet, a faint, coppery undertone whispers beneath it all. A ghost on the breeze. David was the best man I've ever known. A retired high school teacher, a community volunteer, the man who taught me to ride a bike and mend a broken heart. A lifetime of kindness, of small, quiet gestures that built a foundation. That foundation was everything to me. It was solid ground, which is why, when the ground began to shift, the dread felt so absolute. David beamed at her graduation, then later fixed a sink. Sarah's voiceover. He rarely spoke of his childhood, just vague mentions of a tough start and a foster system that shuffled him around. Finally, a kind man named Thomas Rigby adopted him at age 8. Dad described Rigby as quiet, a traveling salesman. He passed when my father was just 16, leaving a modest inheritance that funded his education. We believed it was a tragic yet ultimately redemptive story, a chapter firmly closed. But after Mom died, Dad moved in with me, and I found a dusty cardboard box labeled Dad's Stuff in my attic. The air in that cramped space grew thick with the scent of decay and forgotten memories. He arrived with a single cardboard box, dismissing it as, "Just old tax stuff, sweetheart," with a casual wave. Then last week, a minor fall. He was fine, but sorting his insurance required my birth certificate. The air in the room grew thick and still, carrying the faint scent of aged paper and dust. My fingers brushed the box's cool, rough surface, and a sudden, inexplicable dread tightened in my chest. My hands trembled as I pulled out the files. Receipts, old passports, then a thick, legal envelope. Beneath his original, tattered birth certificate lay the adoption decree. The air in the room turned thick, carrying the scent of aged paper and forgotten years. Every instinct told me this truth was never meant to be found. The one that listed his biological mother as Jane Doe. I'd never seen the adoption papers before. Dad had kept them hidden, so I looked. The air in the study grew thick, carrying the faint scent of old paper and something metallic. At first, it looked official. Crisp letterhead, stamped seals, but the edges felt unnaturally cold to the touch. A low, rhythmic scratching began from within the wall, syncing with the frantic beat in my chest. Ohio, 1974. The judge's signature was there, the notary stamp pressed into the paper. But my friend Mike, a paralegal, knew something was wrong. The ink smelled faintly of ozone, and the paper felt unnaturally cold to the touch. From somewhere in the dark corners of the room, a dry, papery scratching sound began. It was a sound that didn't belong to any file or folder, and it was getting closer. I texted him a picture with a joke. "Think this old thing is worth anything?" His reply flashed on screen. "Sarah, where did you get this?" "Huh," followed by the call log. He called immediately, his voice tight with tension. "Sarah, the judge's name on here? Harold Finley? He died in 1971, 3 years before the document was supposedly signed." A cold certainty took root in my chest as the music shifted to a low, persistent throb. That was the first thread. Pulling it made the entire story unravel. The notary's official commission number wasn't issued by the state until 1978. The courthouse letterhead was for a building that wasn't constructed until 1982. These documents weren't merely old, they were an intricately fabricated fiction. Sarah's laptop screen glowed in the dark room as she scrolled through digital archives late into the night. The stale scent of old paper and digital ozone filled the air as her fingers trembled over the keyboard. Each click revealed another layer of the deception, the truth growing more unsettling with every passing minute. Her face was bathed in the cold, blue glow of the monitor. Sarah's voiceover cut through the stillness. I had tumbled down a rabbit hole. Thomas Rigby, Ohio. The words sat on the screen. The results that followed were unsettlingly sparse. It was far too little information for a man who had supposedly lived for 58 years. No trace in the death index. A ghost in the system. No property records exist after 1976. It was as if the man had simply evaporated. Then, I discovered it. Not about Rigby at all. The air in the archives grew thick, carrying the scent of decaying paper and something metallic, like old blood. Every whisper of turning pages felt like a warning I was only beginning to understand. In the late 70s and early 80s, a chilling pattern emerged. Young boys from group homes and foster care vanished without a trace. Each case left investigators grasping at whispers and dead ends, the disappearances hauntingly consistent. The police sketch offered the only clue. An older man with glasses, his face disturbingly kind. That gentle visage masked an unspeakable horror, a predator who preyed on society's forgotten children. The press dubbed him the Guardian, suspecting he used a false identity to earn the boys' trust before the trail vanished. At her kitchen table, Sarah stares at a faded childhood drawing of her family, the paper worn at the edges. Her gaze shifts to her father's closed bedroom door, where the scent of old wood and faint medicine hangs in the air. Sarah. My dad, David, was adopted in 1974. He was a product of the foster system, fitting the profile perfectly. The timeline aligned with chilling precision. Thomas Rigby wasn't some reclusive benefactor. The air in the room carried the faint, metallic scent of old paperwork and something else, something like cold earth. Every detail clicked into place with a quiet, terrible finality. The pieces weren't just fitting, they were locking. This wasn't a mystery of hidden wealth, but of a past that refused to stay buried. He was a predator, and his adoption of my father wasn't salvation. It was something far more sinister. Sarah's voice breaks, the words catching in her throat as the camera pushes in on her horrified expression. Sarah, voice trembling. But why was Dad the only survivor? Rigby died in 1982. Or did he? Did my father commit something unspeakable? The flawed adoption records and old, yellowed news clippings lay spread before her. A metallic scent, like old ink and fear, clung to the air. Her breath hitched, the truth finally taking its cold, tangible form. She arranged the documents like evidence on an investigator's table. Confronting my father was the most difficult moment of my life. I never intended to accuse him. I simply needed the truth. Then, I placed the papers before him. In the kitchen, the older, gentle David put on his reading glasses. His eyes moved across the document's text, methodically at first. Then, the warmth drained from his features. His gentle smile vanished, replaced by a hollow, rigid stillness. A profound, weary sadness crossed David's face. Not shock, but grim recognition. His voice dropped to a near whisper, each word weighted with dread. Where did you find these? The air grew heavy with the scent of old paper and damp rot, clinging to the silence. Sarah's reply was a single, stark word that seemed to echo in the stillness. The box. Dad, these are forgeries. The judge was dead. The dates are all wrong. Who was Thomas Rigby? David took a long, slow breath, the musty scent of old paper filling his lungs. The air grew thick, with the metallic tang of something ancient and wrong. His fingers traced the ink that shouldn't exist, the texture wrong against his skin. David doesn't glance at the documents. His gaze remains fixed on the window, lost in the fog beyond. The man's name wasn't Thomas Rigby. I never learned his true identity. He only ever gave me one instruction, to call him Tom. Sarah's voice fractured, barely more than a whisper, as she mentioned the news articles about the missing boys. David gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod, his gaze hollow. I knew, he breathed out, the air tasting of dust and old secrets. Not then, but later. A long pause stretched, thick with the scent of damp earth. I was different from the others. I must have resembled someone from his past. A brother, perhaps. My presence seemed to stir some buried memory within him. His demeanor softened noticeably, becoming almost paternal. He began teaching me things, his voice low with a strange, melancholic warmth. I learned how to fix a car, how to keep quiet, to become invisible. But the silence I cultivated began to fray at the edges. Things moved in the periphery, just beyond the streetlights, reach, and in the dead of night, I heard them whispers that carried on the cold, damp air and the slow, deliberate scrape of something heavy being dragged through wet leaves. At 15, I discovered a driver's license in his glove compartment. It bore a stranger's name, yet his face stared back from the plastic. The air in the car grew thick, heavy with the scent of old leather and something metallic. In that moment, I understood. A cold, certain dread settled deep in my bones. I waited. Then one night, he entered my room, not with rage, but with terror. He told me we had to leave immediately. People were starting to ask dangerous questions. The air grew thick with the metallic scent of ozone and decay. He pressed an envelope into my hands. Inside, nothing but cash. A primal dread took hold as I realized this wasn't payment. It was a warning. The papers felt brittle in his hands, smelling faintly of dust and forgotten promises. The words seemed to vibrate with an unnatural weight as he read them aloud. A sticky, metallic scent bloomed in the air as the ink on the page began to darken. He knew then that this wasn't just advice. It was a command from somewhere else. The words came out flat, devoid of emotion. "Forget me," Sarah's voice. A threadbare whisper in the dark. "You just left?" David's reply was a hollow echo. He drove me to a bus station in the dead of night. He put me on a Greyhound to Texas. His final command whispered like a curse. "Never look back, for both our sakes." The next year, a Texas newspaper headline caught my eye. Remains had been found on his old property, 11 of them. The report said he'd simply skipped town, leaving that grim discovery behind. The truth finally spilled out, that he was a ghost. Sarah's voice broke, thick with tears. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "The police." David's reply was hollow, laced with a bitter irony. "And say what? That I was the surviving son of a serial killer?" The air grew heavy between them, thick with the metallic scent of old secrets and the weight of unspeakable history. My entire identity was forged from a lie he crafted to silence me, to keep himself concealed. This life, your mother, you, they were the only truth I ever grasped. I could not endanger it.
The weight of that deception now hangs in the air like ozone before a storm.
I thought I had burned every trace of that other life, but I couldn't bring myself to destroy this. We sat in a heavy, wordless void for what felt like an eternity. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and betrayal. The man I adored was a stranger, a keeper of secrets that now lay exposed between us. A boy who fled a childhood terror, then spent decades constructing a fortress of normalcy to seal it away. He built it brick by painful brick, a monument to forgetting, to keep the horror at bay. I told him I loved him, that he was my dad. Nothing could change that. But something had shifted within me. The scene shifts. Sarah now sits before a flickering monitor, a genealogy website illuminating her pale face. The DNA test kit rested on the desk, a silent harbinger of truth. Sarah's voice whispered through the gloom, heavy with revelation. That lie shielded my father. It protected Thomas Rigby, but it also erased his true bloodline, his real history, leaving only this cold plastic box as evidence. Who were his parents? Did he have siblings? What medical history do I carry? A damp, metallic scent filled the air as the cursor hovered over the search button. The weight of generations pressed down, each unanswered question a whisper in the static. With a click, the screen refreshed, and the past stared back. Her cursor hovered over the button, the screen's blue glow casting an alien pallor across her face. The air in the room grew thick, carrying the faint, metallic scent of ozone from the old monitor. With a final, shaky breath that hitched in her throat, she clicked. Upload raw DNA data, Sarah. So I did the one thing my father never could. I went looking, not for Rigby, but for David. For me.
The DNA results loaded, the progress bar spinning ominously.
1%, 10%, 50%. A faint, acrid smell of ozone filled the air from the humming machine. My breath caught in my throat as the final number appeared. The match notification arrived last week. A close call, this time. My first cousin, Anna, lives right here in the United States. We've been messaging. A private message window glowed on the screen. It read, "Hi Sarah, I got your message. My grandfather had a brother who disappeared as a young man after his son was given up for adoption in Ohio in the late 60s. The final sentence hung in the digital silence. Not an answer, but the first whisper of a decades-old secret. The story always remained a mystery, a cold knot of unanswered questions that tightened with each passing year. We'd love to talk to you, and to David. We're meeting Anna next weekend. Dad is terrified, the quiet, brittle fear that sits in the room like a physical presence, and hopeful, clinging to a fragile thread of possibility that this time, the answers might finally surface. For the first time, he might learn where he truly comes from. Thomas Rigby created a false bloodline to hide his crimes. Paper and lies were meant to bury the truth forever, but a daughter's love and her relentless curiosity can dig far deeper than any grave. The camera holds on that closed drawer, a silent vault holding generations of secrets, and in the heavy quiet, a haunting whisper asks, what truth does a lie protect? How far would you go to keep a monster's secret? The weight of that knowledge settles in your gut, cold and leaden. A metallic scent, like old pennies and ozone, clings to the back of your throat, and in the quiet that follows, you realize the silence is the most terrifying sound of all.